Hello, everybody. Today we're going to look at another module of D&D that has Vecna as its villain. It's called Vecna Reborn. It was the second module to come out with Vecna as the main antagonist, shall we say. And it was also published for AD&D. But unlike the first one, Vecna Lives, which was set in Greyhawk, this particular module was set in the Ravenloft uh, scenario setting, which basically means it is set in the domains of dread. And I will say this to begin with. I really, really like the scenario, and I think it is extremely well written. It was written by another Cook, because the first one was written by Zeb Cook, and the second one was written by Monty Cook. And it was published in, let me just see, I thought there was an imprint somewhere. I want to say 1998, but 1998, here we are. Um, and before we go into any detail, first of all, I would like to say I like the scenario itself. The story is really well written. The dungeon master will find whatever they require in this book. Yes, if you want to, it does make sense to read Vecna Lives first because it gives you a little more insight into the personality of Vecna when he was still a human being. If you have Domains of Dread, yes, you can use this as well, but you don't need it because everything you need to understand what the Domains of Dread are like is in this module as well. It also contains all of the stats for all of the monsters that you may require and that you want to run. If you're going to convert it, and I totally believe you can, taking into account that, of course, AD&D was always a lot more deadly because everyone was supposed to have followers and henchmen. And of course, in 5th edition, you don't have those. You need to tone it down a little, but other than that, I think it's totally convertible. Although it is old school, AD&D, it is not as old school as you might think, and it's definitely not as old school as Die Vecna Die, which I am totally going to run, but which is a really large dungeon crawl for a large amount of the module. This one does have a couple of dungeons, but it is also a city adventure. And yes, you heard right. It's a city adventure. It's a tale of two cities, as it were. And before we start with my review, I want to read to you what it says in the module to the Dungeon Master to set things in motion and to kind of set the scene a little because it is only half a page, the adventure summary, but it is so well written and it encapsulates everything that you need to know, and I think it gives you a very good idea of the flavor. A chance encounter on the road marks the heroes as targets for an evil cult attempting to cause the rebirth of the lich god Vecna in the domain of his archfoe Kas. This act will free their master from his misty prison and allow him to gain vengeance upon his enemy at the same time. To learn more of the cult's mysterious plans, the characters explore a cache of ancient lore in Torgorak, the major city in Tovag. Clues lead them right to the heart of Cavicius, Vecna's own domain, and there they must discover the secret way into the Shadowed Room, an ancient library that will no longer exist in time or space, but can still be reached by using an arcane ritual. Learning this secret brings the heroes into conflict with Vecna's priesthood and their powerful servants. Meanwhile, the cultists in Torgorak continue to set in motion the events required to free Vecna, including spreading a magical plague that devastates the entire domain. The heroes must then return to this disease-ridden realm once they escape Citadel Cavicius, Vecna's stronghold. With the knowledge gained in the Shadowed Room, the characters can find the cultists and stop their plans. In the finale, the cult breaks into an asylum in Torgorak to kill one of its inmates as the final condition of their ritual. If the heroes do not prevent this from happening, Vecna is reborn, outside of the domain borders that imprison him, free to wreak vengeance upon Kas, Tovag, and possibly the rest of the multiverse. Dun dun dun. So, as you can see, we are preparing for earth-shattering events here. So what you can gather already is, first of all, it's set in the domains of dread, and basically Cass and Vecna have been cast into the domains of dread, but in such a way that they kind of share one of those domain islands. One is Citadel Cavicius, and the other one is Tovag, and together they form the Burning Peaks. And in the Domains of Dread book from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, this one is actually described. In Van Richten's 5th edition, a description of the Ravenloft domains, it's not there anymore. So obviously they're not going to reinvigorate this, which is a shame. And basically what happens is Vecna has been cast into Citadel Cavicius, and he's at war with Cass, who is in Tovag, and the two of them have armies that basically clash every so often, and there's an ongoing war. And the humans that live in Tovag are, of course, downtrodden by Cass, and Cass basically breeds warriors. Now, this sounds a lot more terrible than it actually is described in the module. And those of you who know Sparta at all in ancient Greece will not be too surprised by this, because essentially Tovag is a land in a constant state of war, much like Sparta, that basically declared war upon the Messenians once a year, so that killing Messenians wasn't a crime, and basically they were constantly battling those slaves in order to keep them in control. And also, of course, they had ongoing wars with Athens, on and off, and of course Persia and so on and so forth. So you can imagine that this is a lot like this, only the fact that there are no citizens that can influence what's going on, but everything is ruled by caste. There is a militia that's basically roaming the streets and keeping everyone in check. People who don't conform to the ideal, mainly, for example, people who are either too injured to fight, sometimes get killed. People who are mentally unstable also get killed, but there is an insane asylum which plays an important role later on. But basically, it is a domain of dread, and people are unhappy. A Citadel Cavicius is mainly inhabited by undead, and they are the undead forces that Vecna sends in his war against Cass, and the heroes somehow make it into the domain of dread. Usually, you enter a mist somewhere, mist descends upon you, and when you wake up again, you are suddenly in the domains of dread, but you don't know where you are. And basically, the heroes walk around in a mountainous area, and they meet a woman who's heavily pregnant, and she takes them to Tovag, and she says that she's looking for her husband, who's a soldier in the army of Cass. Now, unbeknownst to the heroes, this lady is pregnant, and has been chosen to be the vessel for the reborn Vecna. And in order for Vecna to be reborn, a ritual has to be carried out, and 3 holy words or unholy words must be spoken in a certain order. And the heroes can find out that there is something going on in Tovag, and then, in order to stop the whole thing, because there are Vecna cultists in Tovag now trying to bring about this ritual, trying to bring about Vecna's rebirth. And if anyone wants to stop this, they have to find out how the ritual works and how to prevent it. And you can only do this by going to Citadel Cavicius and enter the Forbidden Library that Vecna put together a long, long time ago, and find the ritual there, learn how it works, then go back and then try and prevent the ritual from being carried out. Now, however, the problem is that one part of the ritual has already been carried out by the time that the heroes return to Tovag, and that is that a plague has been sent to Tovag and many, many people have died. And the last part of the ritual involves that while the vessel is giving birth, a king needs to be killed and blood needs to be spilt, royal blood. And this may sound really weird because why is there a king? But in the module, there is one way of actually having a king, which is very ingenious. In the beginning, when I was reading it, I was like, why is this? This is a weird side quest. But it all makes sense in the end, and I promise it'll make sense in the end. When you read the module or when you play through it, it'll make sense. The mood of the Domains of Dread has been captured really well. I said in the Vecna Lives module review that I was very disappointed in the way Citadel Cavicius was not described. There was nothing going on in Citadel Cavicius, although this would be the best place to run parts of a module. They just completely kind of like, yeah, well, it's there. There are undead, but there's so much negative energy that they don't even have to attack the living, so they just live side by side, the living, and you kind of go, okay, so that's probably one of the most boring places you can be if you have undead and they don't do anything. But both Tovag and Citadel Cavicius are really well described, in my opinion, and there is a lot you can do there. The atmosphere is really well described. You could put in additional quests um, for the party to follow through. You don't have to rush it. Yes, you can put kind of like a timer on it because you can make it like more and more pressing that they move to Citadel Cavicius and then back. But you can also kind of take it slowly, depending on what your party is into. Um, Reading what Monty Cook writes about the Domains of Dread, or the Burning Peaks, I should say, and taking into account what you can find in the Domains of Dread PDF, or you can even get the printed version of DM's Guild if you like, there is enough for you to flesh these out even more. As they are written, I would say it's probably, well, when I look at my party, they would probably take about 10 sessions to play through this. Um, but if you have a party that's really kind of like focused and just goes bam, 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 plot point, plot point, plot point, which you can do, it'll probably take you about 12 hours of game time. So if you play 3 hours, maybe 4 sessions. Um, and you can also, if you want to, make shortcuts. It's easy to cut out plot points, or it's easy to just basically guide your party in a certain direction without actually railroading them, but simply by not giving them certain options. Um, and I have to say, reading it, I had a really big sense of satisfaction as a DM because I felt this is all that I need in order to run this module. The story is interesting. I wouldn't say that it's probably one of the most innovative storylines. Big bad wants to be reborn, cultists bring it about, you've got a pregnant woman, blah, blah, blah. You have a ritual that needs to be stopped. In order to be able to stop the ritual, you have to find out what it is. In order to do this, you have to find a secret book. It's all been done, but you don't need to be original. You just have to be interesting, and I think it really is very interesting. Um, Theme-wise, it's the Domains of Dread, and it's AD&D, so it's not sanitized. We're dealing with a heavily pregnant woman who is being drugged by her uncle, who is actually a Vecna cultist, which in and of itself may be dreadful for a lot of people, and they kind of go, I don't want to touch this with a barge pole. So it is one of the ones where I would say read it and think about your group, especially, pregnancy can be a tough topic for people. Endangering a child can be a very tough topic. Spoiler, the child always lives. Um, there isn't even a scenario option where the mother and child die. It's just it could turn into the Omen, um, because there is a chance that uh, the party is not successful and Vecna is reborn. Now the point is, and this is very different from Vecna Lives, where basically the party just stands by as IUs and Vecna battle it out, and they have no influence on it because there is two demigods fighting it out. Here, it's not that they're confronting Vecna directly, it's that they're trying to prevent his rebirth. So at the end of the day, they're fighting cultists. They're fighting militia. Uh, they are powerful, and they're also fighting a huge tentacled being, which is not even a boss fight at all. It's not even the end of anything. Kind of happens in the middle of the module, and there is a very good chance that they all die. So there is a TPK right there. So you have to be careful. Again, AD&D, they had henchmen. Oh, you just go down that tunnel and check it out, Ulrich. It's gonna be fine. And so essentially, um, there are different ways in which the scenario can end, and each one of them is described. So at no point is the DM or will the DM be in a situation where he's like, well, if this happens, I don't know how the story will end. Of course, you can make up your own endings. That's not what I'm saying. But if you have never run such a module before, it doesn't leave it um, to you to kind of like sink or swim. It tells you exactly what kind of things can happen, how, for example, the ritual can be stopped. There are different options, and this is what I really like. So Monty Cook has obviously read the 3-clue rule and internalized it in terms of that he can use it. There are different ways and different combinations of events that can stop the ritual. If it doesn't work, if for some reason the party doesn't manage to stop the ritual, Vecna will be reborn. And then of course, this is a whole new campaign. That's going to be an awesome thing because from there you can take it straight into Die Vecna Die, which is a 160-page long module, which takes it to the very next level and possibly shatters the whole space-time continuum multiverse in the end. So, but if you win, of course, if he's not reborn, he just stays in the domain of dread, which also means that, of course, you could bring him back somehow, or somebody could bring him back for Vecna Die. So, it's one of the ones where you have like a villain that will always be a villain, but he's a continuous presence. And unlike Vecna Lives, where you really just, at the end of the day, are there to witness two demigods battling it out. Here you have agency. The player agency is clearly there. And they also give you ideas of what you can do afterwards. So basically, if Vecna doesn't get reborn, what could you do? Well, you could go back to Citadel Cavicius and have adventures there. You could help the people there because there is human beings there. There are sentient beings there that are not undead. You could stay in Torvag and try and help the people overthrow Cass because Cass, of course, is still there. He's subjugating all of these people. So Cass could be something like Strahd, you know. You could totally build your own domain of dread and basically flesh out Torvag. You could flesh out Citadel Cavicius, and they give you a couple of ideas there. So I think it is, and it says it's for 5th to 6th level characters. Now, I'm not so sure. I looked at 5th and 6th level characters in AD&D. They don't seem to be so tough, and I really don't understand how they could survive this, unless, of course, each one of them brings like 5 henchmen, and then they just send them in. But you could totally build a Domains of Dread Burning Peaks campaign out of this. Or you could bring your players back into whichever land they come from, Greyhawk, Sword Coast, wherever, and have Vecna in one shape or form still as a lurking presence, because obviously they have been to the Domain of Dread. That should have altered them somehow, the party, I mean. You know, and I totally like it, and I would really like to recommend it, because even today I think it's a relevant module, which you could easily convert to 5th edition. And with the right party that really enjoys this kind of dark mood, and we know from Curse of Strahd, which has been a very successful and well-selling module for Wizards of the Coast 5th edition D&D, there is a market there. And like I said, I mean, you can convert it easily yourselves. and I would totally recommend it. And that's all from me for today. I will review um, Vecna Lives. Sorry, Die Vecna Die. Yeah, I get confused at this stage. Because I think it's really an awesome module as well, and I am totally going to run it. And we're already making plans how we can bring our current D&D group that's currently in Barovia into this story, or how we can bring this story into our version of the multiverse of D&D. So that's me signing off. Have a lovely rest of the day, evening, wherever and whenever you are listening to this, and keep gaming. Bye.